Hello and welcome. I'm Dante, and today we're starting off our dive into the Lore of Anthem, with one of the core story structures and organizations that flow through the game, the Legion of Dawn. Not just the founders of Javelins, but a deep organization, with its own code and ideals, with origins that have been lost to folklore. So let's jump in and discover who they were, why they existed, and what is yet to come. To tell the tale of the Legion and their rise, we must first look into the past, to a time when humanity was weak, segregated and enslaved. The continent of Bastion was once ruled by a race known as the Urgoth, though much about them has been lost to time. They were a race of slavers and oppressors that used humanity to build their homes, pick their food, and stored them in caves. Those fortunate enough to be free of captivity were known as the Free Folk. This relatively small population formed the town of Antium, just outside the reach of the Urgoth, due to the mountainous terrain and terrible storms. Outside of Antium, the other Free Folk hid from the Urgoth, amongst the complex caves of Bastion, living every day evading capture, unable to stand against the military might of the Urgoth. That was until one band of slaves changed history forever. A frantic escape into the forest by one group led to a slaughter, but one survived, a young Helena Tarsis, who found her way to one of the hidden groups, a rumour amongst the slaves of Free Folk. Once free, Helena made it her duty to repay the debt to her fallen friends and family that paid for her freedom, and so she joined two other like-minded individuals who plotted to unite humanity and to find their freedom. Helena Tarsis joined Garrett, who would later become her husband, and Arden Vasa. These three would become some of the most well-known names in all of humanity. But before then, they plotted. They started by gathering the Free Folk into underground forces, training them to fight, and using the skills of Arden Vasa, an Arcanist who himself had escaped captivity along with his mentor, creating invisible signs to help lead those that escaped back to the growing forces of the Free Folk. Though not everyone was a soldier, the ranks of the Legion were diverse, containing Arcanists, engineers, healers, cooks, and those that would become Lancers, earning the title of Legionnaires. It's through Arden Vasa and his skills as a master crafter, able to manipulate the substance of Ember into pliable materials through his study and ultimately reverse engineering of devices known as forges. Their origins were never really known, but the Shapers had created them alongside the relics to create and transform materials into new objects. This study ultimately led to the discovery of Javelins, weaponized suits capable of flight, and able to generate enough power to be equipped with more advanced armaments than had ever been created for a single person. At the same time as these discoveries, Garrett had begun to chronicleize their plans and discoveries, to both preserve their creations and to gain more support for their cause of ultimately overthrowing their oppressors, earning himself the title of Chronicler. He created the Volumes of Tarsis, in which it said that Vasa managed to construct the very first Javelin suit in only 5 days, designed specifically for Helena. This suit was the true beginning of the Legion of Dawn, with Helena at its head, her husband and Vasa at her side, finally with a weapon to fight back. It wasn't long before word of this new creation began to spread amongst the Free Folk, reaching all the way to those that had been captured. Rumours of a resistance and of the creation of an army. These were known as Legionnaires, the first followers of Helena and her fight to push back. She created a code from the songs of Anthem itself as it spoke to her. 3 paths, the path of resolve, of might, and of valour. Together, they were the foundation of what made the Legion, and what made her Honour Guard so powerful. Only by becoming the embodiment of these values could a Javelin suit be earned, ensuring that the best of humanity would lead them. Many of these would become legends in their own right, such as Artina the Sharpshooter, the best ever to wield a firearm, that even after losing one of her arms, was able to be the deadliest shot in a javelin, able to pick out a weak point in both her enemies and the environment. It's even rumoured she took down a whole bridge of soldiers with but one shot, Karif the Tactician, the embodiment of resolve and patience. While others would charge headlong into battle, Karif took moments to assess, understand movements and behaviours, then exploit them for maximum destruction with minimum force. He's said to be the greatest tactical mind to live. These are but a select few of her guard, all legends in their own right. Helana, she had many stories to tell. Her iconic blade is the ultimate weapon that secured humanity's freedom, a weapon that came to her through the songs of the Anthem, just as the paths had been laid out for her in her mind. This time it led her to a being known as Fulminos, a powerful creator that sat atop the mountains far out of reach of mere humans, unable to climb the steep cliff-like walls. The creature summoned giants and monstrosities down upon humanity, terrorizing them and leaving the free folk to live in fear, even if the Urgoth didn't get to them first. The creature commanded the storms that dominated the region, with burning ash and lightning. Helena knew that if they were to be free, they needed to conquer the mountain, so she, along with a handful of her legionnaires, flew to the top of the unreachable mountains and sought out the creature, battling for 3 days, exhausted and out of resources, but ultimately victorious. She tore the song of the beast from its throat and crafted a weapon from it. Few believe she literally pulled a song, but those are the exact words Garrod used. It's said that this sword sang the song of triumph. The workings of the Shapers are unknown, and tales tell of Anthem's song and how it calls to those with a gift. Perhaps this is what she heard, making Helana herself a cipher. If she could harness the power of Fulminos, the beast of the mountain, their ability to control an aspect of Anthem, to create, to destroy, that would be a power capable of freeing humanity from their oppressors. Harnessing this song into a powerful artifact, the Sword of Thunder. It wasn't long until the Song of Heaven, that she thought was the Anthem, sung to her again, leading her and her newly formed legion back to where they had started, their first sanctuary. The place that led to the creation of Javelins, started the legion and brought humanity to a new dawn. The battle that was soon to follow, the culmination of the work of Helana, Garrod, Vassa, and the legion they had created, Helena wasn't just blindly following the song she heard, but over the years of creating her legion had become an accomplished tactician and had mastered her javelin suit, earning her the title of General. As the legion grew from a resistance force to a full army, with ranks of legionnaires, arcanists, and her most trusted members, the Honor Guard, equipped with their own javelin suits, all made under the guide of Arden Vassa. Though he may be considered the father of javelins and most well-known arcanist in recorded history, he was not alone. As Helena built her legion, Vassa built an enclave of arcanists. Together, they developed 4 archetypes that freelancers still use today, though much older versions of each. In the same way, her husband, who unfortunately passed during battle, created the Volumes of Tarsus. Though he had died, in his wake, other legionnaires picked up his mantle, using his name to flesh out the volumes and to tell their story. The Legion of Dawn set their defences as the Urgoth surrounded the legions of Sanctuary, nestled within the mountains, filling the valleys below. Their overwhelming forces made victory seem clear, but everything was going according to Helana's plan. The Urgoth began to cheer, to laugh, attempting to intimidate the seemingly vulnerable resistance forces. Even the greatest of the Legion's forces were dwarfed by the hordes of Urgoth soldiers, but they had come prepared, using the overwhelming size and confidence against their oppressors. Helana's newly forged weapon, the Sword of Thunder, would literally level the battlefield and swing the conflict in their favour. Helana's newly forged weapon, the Sword of Thunder, would literally level the battlefield and swing the conflict in their favour. Unleashing the voices of heaven, that voice that led her to this moment, its song shattered the mountain. Waves of rock poured into the valley below, sweeping and submerging the Urgoth under an avalanche of rock and dirt. The battle was immediately won, but the final phase of the war had only just begun. The Urgoth immediately became vengeful, with many of their forces buried and their path ahead to the Legion all but cut off. They immediately changed direction, heading south, to the only free society of humanity, Antium. Long before it became vibrant and prosperous, laying further south away from the mountains and free of the Urgoth's oppressive influence, considered the only hope for humanity's future, they planned to storm it and finally crush all hope that humanity might thrive. With the mountain collapsed, the Legion were unable to engage the Urgoth. So Helana called upon her most powerful allies, those capable of travelling at much greater speed in their javelin armour, rushing to head off the comparatively slow Urgoth. Helana and her guard made it, barely, landing upon the steps of Antium moments before the host of vindictive Urgoth arrived at the outer walls. It's here that Helana and her legion made their stand. The gates of Antium were sealed, ready for the breach, but with no standing forces, Helana and her closest guard were on their own. It would be 3 days until reinforcements could arrive, making the long journey past the mountains. In that time, Helana and her guard held, starting their defences at the bottom point of Antium's long stairway, being pushed back and back each day until their backs were pressed against the gates themselves. But the Legion did arrive, sweeping into the back lines of the Urgoth host, tearing their way through, eradicating what had been generations of oppression. The gates of Antium held. Not a single Urgoth made it through, but at the cost of Helana herself and much of her guard. Her final sacrifice was to save humanity, to become the martyr and give hope back to the Legion and now free race of humans. Freedom had finally been earned. The followers of the Legion could take a moment to rest, but ultimately, without their leader, the foundations of the Legion of Dawn began to crack, splitting into 3 key factions that would tread their own paths. The volumes of Tarsus tell us that the 3 melodies sung together only in discord, and none could bear the sound. Their core beliefs for humanity all differed slightly, so they forged their own path. The path of resolve is sung by the Sentinels. As the cities of humanity expanded and new settlements were established, they would serve the high walls of the cities, protecting them with their lives, as Helana once had for Antium. The path of might was sung by the Paladins, who believed in might and strength above all else. Seeing the other paths as closed-minded or needlessly reckless in hopes of freedoms, they formed a new civilization, based on military might and strength in unity, at the cost of freedom, eventually becoming the Dominion. The last path, the Song of Valor, was championed by the Freelancers, who amongst all else idealized courage and are considered the closest to the ways of Helana, the ones who would protect others, not because they are told to or to show strength, but because it's the right thing to do. As the seams of the Legion fell and the paths went their own ways, preparations were made, in the hopes that when the time is right and when the Legion would be needed once more, those who are worthy will reform the path of the Legion, to reignite the song of all paths, so that only those with the resolve, the might and the valour of a Legionnaire would rediscover the secrets long lost. This gauntlet was laid out by the last serving member of the founders of the Legion, the creators of the Javelin, Ardenvasa. As the dust settled and the need for the Legion lessened, Ardenvasa headed to Antium, at the head of a throng of followers. Together, they invented almost everything that symbolizes the strength of modern-day humanity, starting with the towering walls and fortifications, removing the threat of the wilds, transforming Antium from a small village to a thriving city, no longer hamstrung by fear, a haven for humanity, and a template for other cities to follow. Vasa had his own family within these walls, his children, Fortuo and Del, teaching him the ways of the Arcanist, as students of a large college to train new Arcanists, as inventors and engineers. Once they had learnt all they could, they had their own families. Del remained in Antium as what quickly became the ruling class in the wake of the significant impacts their family had provided this new age of humanity. Fortuo took their own path and set out to create another city, replicating the success of Antium for a whole new generation further out into the wilds. The final act of the Legion was part tradition and part preparation. As with all Legionnaires, the bodies of those fallen were recovered and burnt, a tradition that's original purpose is lost, but is believed to be both a sign of respect for the dead and to prevent the Urgoth from defiling their bodies. To what means died with the last of the Urgoth and the Legion. The bodies of Helena and 4 of her most outstanding honor guard were set in tombs that, once found and their challenges met, would reveal the path back to the Legion of Dawn. The Song of Heaven did not belong to one path, but was the glorious chorus of all combined. As such, only those with the dedication to honor all of them could pass these trials. Artinia the Sharpshooter, the best shot to ever have the honor of wearing a javelin. Even with one arm, it was said she could never miss a shot. Karif the Tactician, whose strategy and resourcefulness led to countless victories that otherwise would have been lost. A symbol of calm and patience, and only to strike when the most is to be gained. Gorns the Blade Master, a symbol of courage and raw might, able to cut down waves of enemies with only a blade. And finally, Yevenia the Forgerite, the constructor of Dawn itself. She stands forever the constructor of Tarsus and the saviour to all those that find comfort within its walls. Honouring their sacrifice, walking their path and that of Helena, will one day allow new legionnaires to rise. The voice of heaven will once more be heard, a new dawn to stand against the threats that face humanity, even those thought lost and defeated. Members of the Legion, the Bard and the Chronicler, await this dawn, ready to tell its stories and listen to the voice of heaven.